Naomi Vance lost her voice on Christmas Eve during the third verse of "O Holy Night." She felt it go, a wet snap somewhere deep in her throat, and she finished the song anyway because 2,000 people were watching and because finishing was what she did. She hit the high note. It came out cracked, and she smiled through it, the way she smiled through everything. And when the lights dropped, she spat blood into a tissue in the green room and told Ethan it was just a bad cold. The ENT at Vanderbilt found the nodule on December 26th. Hemorrhagic. Surgery in January. Minimum 12 weeks of absolute silence, then reevaluation. No whispering, the doctor said. No mouthing words, no throat clearing. Your vocal cords need to believe you don't exist. Naomi wrote her questions on a notepad. Will I sing again? Maybe, if you're careful, if you're lucky. The doctor paused. But Mrs. Vance, you've been pushing damaged cords for months. The body was telling you. You weren't listening. She didn't tell the church the full prognosis. She wrote vocal rest in the staff email and let them assume it was temporary, minor, a professional hazard. The worship team hired a replacement, a 24-year-old from Atlanta with perfect pitch and 80,000 Instagram followers. Naomi watched his first Sunday from the sound booth, her arms crossed, her throat aching with the effort of silence. She tried to pray that first week. She sat in her home office, the one where she'd written King of My Heart and Come Alive, and a dozen other songs that people still requested, and she opened her mouth and nothing came out. Not just no sound, no words. Her mind reached for lyric, for melody, for the chord progression that usually carried her into God's presence. Without it, the room felt empty. She wasn't sure if she'd ever felt God there, or if she'd felt the music, the performance, the certainty of her own gift. She wrote in her journal, because the doctor said she could write. I don't know how to reach you without my voice. She didn't show Ethan the entry. The church assigned her to the prayer room in February. It was her idea, sort of. The pastor had asked what she wanted to do during recovery, and she'd suggested something small, invisible, somewhere she couldn't be compared to her replacement. The prayer room was a converted storage closet off the east hallway, 10 feet square, carpeted in brown industrial fiber that smelled like old coffee. 2 chairs, a small table, a box of tissues, a Bible with a cracked spine. She sat there during services while the main auditorium shook with drums and lights and the new guy's flawless tenor. People came in alone or in pairs, rarely more. They sat across from her and spoke their requests into the quiet. My mother's in hospice, pancreatic. She won't see Easter. I lost my job 3 weeks ago. I've told my wife I'm working from home. My son's using again. He won't answer my calls. Naomi wrote their prayers on index cards because she couldn't speak them aloud. She wrote slowly, carefully, the silence of the room pressing against her ears. The first few weeks she felt useless. A worship leader who couldn't worship, praying by proxy for strangers who didn't know who she was. Then she started noticing things. The woman with the son in rehab came every Sunday for 6 weeks. Her name was Gloria. She wore the same navy coat, carried the same purse with a broken clasp. On the 7th week, she didn't come. Naomi waited, wrote no index card, felt an unexpected grief. On the 8th week, Gloria returned with 2 coffees from the church lobby. She set one in front of Naomi and said, "He's using again." But he called me, first time in a year. She sat for 20 minutes without speaking, then left. Naomi drank the coffee, lukewarm and too sweet, and felt something shift in her chest that wasn't musical. The man who sat in silence came twice. The third time, he cried for 2 minutes, wiped his face with his sleeve, and left. Naomi never learned his name. She wrote "Unknown Grief" on an index card and kept it. In March, she found a card she'd written months ago before the surgery, tucked in the back of the prayer journal she kept in her bag. Her own handwriting, shaky, dated September 14th, the day after her last failed fertility treatment. Let me be enough without this. She stared at it for a long time. She didn't remember writing it. She remembered the day, the drive home from the clinic, Ethan quiet in the passenger seat, the way she'd gone straight to the church and rehearsed for 3 hours until her voice gave out. She'd written the prayer and forgotten it, or buried it, or sung over it until it couldn't be heard. Now it had been answered, and she was fighting the answer. She wrote beneath it, new ink, different pen. I'm here. I'm trying. Ethan left in April, not dramatically. He packed a bag, said he needed space, said he'd been trying to talk to her for 2 years, and she was always either on stage or recovering for the next stage. He said he loved her. He said he didn't know her without the performance, and he wasn't sure she did either. Naomi didn't write a response. She let him go. She sat in the prayer room that Sunday while the church celebrated Easter without her, and Gloria came in with a photograph of her son, 6 weeks clean, standing in front of a church in Macon. The man who cried didn't come. Someone new did, a teenager who said her parents were getting divorced and she didn't know which one to blame. Naomi wrote it all down, every word, and when the service ended, she stayed in the chair, the index cards fanned on the table, and she felt something like prayer without lyrics. She wrote in her journal that night, I thought my voice was how you heard me. I think maybe it was how I heard myself. She sang again in June, 6 months after the surgery. Not on stage. A nursing home in East Nashville, the church's monthly outreach, 20 seniors in wheelchairs and 1 upright piano with sticky keys. She played simple chords, her left hand still clumsy, and sang It Is Well, in a voice that broke on the high notes and had no vibrato, and sounded, she thought, like someone who had actually been through something. A woman with oxygen tubes in her nose gripped Naomi's wrist when the song ended. You used to be on the big screen, she said, at my daughter's church. You sound better now. Naomi laughed, surprised, the sound rough and real. Thank you. No, I mean it. Before, you were pretty. Now you're here. She wrote a new song in July, the first she'd composed alone, without Ethan's production ear, without thinking about arrangement or key or what would translate to a full band. She called it Index Cards. She recorded it on her phone in the prayer room. 1 take. Voice still fragile. Piano simple. She posted it because Gloria asked her to, because the teenager with the divorcing parents said she needed to hear it again. It got 847 views. Her covers used to get 50,000. She didn't check the numbers after the first day. In August, the church asked if she wanted to lead worship again, full-time. The new guy was moving to Dallas. Naomi considered it. She walked into the empty auditorium, stood at the microphone she'd stood at for a decade, and she could imagine it. The lights, the crowd, the feeling of being chosen, being seen, being enough. She wrote her answer on a notepad and handed it to the pastor. Not yet. Maybe not here. She stayed in the prayer room. She kept writing index cards. She learned the names of the regulars, learned to recognize their footsteps in the hallway, learned that faith without a microphone was slower, smaller, harder to measure, and somehow more hers than it had ever been. One morning in October, she sat alone in the prayer room before services, the index cards spread on the table, and she spoke aloud for the first time in months, testing her voice, no melody, just words. Thank you, she said, for not needing me to perform. The room was quiet. The auditorium would fill soon. Naomi gathered the cards, straightened the chairs, and waited for whoever came next. Maybe you don't stand on a stage with a microphone. Maybe your gift is teaching. Maybe it's building things. Maybe it's leading a business, raising children, serving at church, or simply being the one everyone depends on. Those are wonderful gifts. God gives them to us for a reason. But somewhere along the way, it's easy to believe that our gift is what makes us valuable to God. The enemy loves that lie, because if your value comes from what you can do, then the day you can't do it anymore, you'll wonder if God still has a place for you. Naomi thought God wanted her songs. What he really wanted was her heart. Jesus said, "Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me." John 15:4. Did you notice something? When Naomi lost her voice, she finally began to hear. She heard the hurting people sitting across from her. She heard the quiet prayers she'd buried beneath years of applause. She heard her own heart, and somewhere in that silence, she heard God. Sometimes God doesn't remove a gift because he's angry. Sometimes he sets it down for a little while, so we remember that the giver is greater than the gift. If you've lost something that once defined you, a career, a dream, your health, your voice, don't assume God has stepped away. It may be that he's inviting you into a deeper place where your identity is no longer found in what you do for him, but in simply belonging to him. The greatest worship we will ever offer God isn't the song we sing. It's the life that quietly says, "Here I am, Lord. Apart from me, you can do nothing." John 15:5.